Just want to bring in another guest if I can. Let's speak to the father of Scarlett West, a survivor from the Tameside area of Greater Manchester. It's Marlon West. Marlon West, it's so great to speak to you this evening. You've been campaigning for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal for many years. What's your reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's announcement this evening?
So for me, I really welcome it. However, I've possibly got more questions than answers at this point. I know it's breaking news. One is, I don't want the Prime Minister to take credit for this. He refused to meet me. And I've tried to work with Labour. This is not working against them. This is working with them. And for him to start taking credit now, which he possibly will do, I think will be offensive towards campaigners like myself and survivors. We all know why he's done it, and it's because of the Casey report. And he's pressurised, and he doesn't want a rebellion within his party and lose the lead. That said, I do welcome it.
Marlon, because as you know, this is an issue right across the country. Now, you're in the Greater Manchester area where there has been a local inquiry. Now, we know that the government have told us this evening that they will be working with those local inquiries to include this national inquiry, so they'll feed into a wider picture. Now, what's your experience been of those local inquiries in Greater Manchester? What's your reaction to that involvement? Does that make sense to you, or do you think they should just go for national only?
National only. So Andy Burnham, he did the Operation Span. It's still going. Okay, it didn't have statutory powers, but Greater Manchester Police refused to engage in that. They refused to share information. Police officers refused to even be interviewed. So no, let's start from scratch. I don't want to hear the word ICSA again, because that's what I've constantly had thrown at me. Let's start from new.
Marlon, we revealed last year that the two men who were leading the Greater Manchester review, the next stage, part 4 of the local inquiry there, were denied access to some evidence by Greater Manchester Police, and they resigned because of that. So if these local inquiries don't have the powers, where these people who are leading the inquiries need to get the information to produce their reports, how can the local inquiries work? Now, the government will say, by contrast, that in Telford, the local inquiry led to real change. What's been your reaction to their defence of the local inquiries?
Appalling. You've just said it yourself. They've got no statutory powers. So why would they use an inquiry when police officers have refused to give evidence on other professionals? It's just a no-brainer.
And Marlon, just reflecting on your experience, I mean, you've been enduring this horrific scenario for many, many years now. Your daughter is enormously brave in what's been achieved so far, but there's so much more to be done. Do you now have renewed faith that you might get some justice for your daughter and the many thousands of children across the country who've been in similarly awful scenarios?
Well, as I said, I welcome it. At this moment in time, I don't trust the Labour government with the experiences I've had with very much closed doors. And one of the big questions that does interest me, so my daughter Scarlett, I've been on GBNews before. She was raped by over 60 Muslim men. She was trafficked, Birmingham, Bradford came up a lot, and no prosecution has ever happened. So my question is, with this public inquiry, are they just going to look at historic prosecutions? What about all these girls who have never had a prosecution? Because as far as I'm concerned, it was cover-ups by the police forces and by local authority. One of the things that I'm involved with at the moment is a project called the National Archive. We're trying to bring in as many survivors that have not had prosecutions. So we've got an archive and a list.
Yeah, and plenty more voices, you hope, will now come forward, will say to this judge-led inquiry, once it is set up, I've got something to tell you. There's something that's happened to me. Do you have confidence that more people will do that this moment, because The Prime Minister is now in favour of investigating this with a judge-led inquiry. Do you think that political intervention could give confidence to more survivors, or have their families and the women and girls who've faced this around the country, do you think they've totally lost faith in politics after years of this being an issue?
I think a lot of them have lost faith. I think it needs to be very, very clear what kind of questions they're asking, who's involved, to reassure the public for them to come forward.
Marlon, I just want to go back to January, if you don't mind. Let's hear what the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said when she made this first announcement in the House of Commons.
It will also provide stronger national backing for local inquiries where they are needed to get truth and justice for victims and survivors. Effective local inquiries can delve into far more local detail and deliver more locally relevant answers.
Locally relevant answers. The government has said that we don't need a national inquiry because these local reviews make a difference. Why have they now gone against that message for many, many months and launched that national inquiry? Do you think that Baroness Casey has taught them a lesson in her findings?
I believe so. I don't know Louise Casey personally. I believe she's a first character and she's moral. So obviously from her findings, she's not going to back down on it.
Marlon,
and she's not campaign either.
And Marlon, let's also go back to April, when the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillip, who's been a core part of this discussion, she also made an announcement after the original announcement from Yvette Cooper.
We'll set out the process through which local authorities can access the £5 million national fund to support locally led work on grooming gangs. Following feedback from local authorities, the fund will adopt a flexible approach to support both full independent local inquiries and more bespoke work.
Notice the change there, Marlon, of course. In January, the Home Secretary said locally led inquiries, but in April, Jess Phillips said locally led work following feedback from local authorities. And this is the real concern, isn't it, Marlon, that local authorities, as part of these inquiries, will say, we don't want that, no thank you. Many of them, indeed, may have Labour leadership, and that could delay proper investigation. Do you have confidence, then, that this judge-led inquiry, being set up by a Labour government, will force those local authorities to make those proper investigations and inquiries, or do you think they will resist after local feedback?
I think if it's got statutory powers, and I'm hopeful, and I have to have hope, I've been working with this so long, that they will have to come forward and they'll have to be investigated. You know, my council is Tameside Council, where Scarlett was groomed. The director of children's services won't even meet with me. Nobody will speak to me. But don't get me wrong, I don't think this is any different across the country. Tameside are not anything special. So hopefully that will happen.
Marlon, just before we leave you, please tell me what your reaction was when you saw that news at 6. How did it feel? Because I know exactly what you think, and I've heard you say it so many times, and I've always been very grateful for you to come out and share it. But how did that feel when you saw that news pop up on your phone?
Mixed feelings. I felt, I guess, elated, relieved, and then I guess I became somewhat hypervigilant, and I started thinking, because I don't trust Labour, and I just think, what's your game here? Where are you going with this?
Marlon, thank you so much. Very grateful for your time this evening, and we'll stay in touch.
Thing before
Please,
we go.
Go on.
Charlie, thank you so much for your support with this campaign. You've been brilliant, and I'd also like to thank Kemi's team as well. They've been really supportive. Thank you.
It's been an honour to share your voice and your concerns. Marlon, thank you so much for coming on the programme this evening. Very happy to say I'm joined now by the Labour MP for Rochdale, Paul Waugh. Paul, thank you very much for coming on to GB News this evening. First and foremost, why do you think Sir Keir Starmer has called for that judge-led inquiry?
Charlie, and can I first say thanks very much to you for all your reporting on this. You've been groundbreaking, as so GBNews as a whole, on making sure that spotlight is thrown properly onto this appalling crime. Particularly in Rochdale here, we've suffered from this for far too long. We just last week had some convictions of some of these perverts, and no question they're of predominantly Pakistani heritage. The most important thing is the victims at all of this. And that's why I'm pleased that this national inquiry is going to happen. I think that actually what happened was the right process, which was the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary ordered this national audit into grooming into its extent, and also whether any racial links, to find the facts and get the preliminary facts. And now that we've got those facts from Louise Casey, they're endorsing in full her report, which is the right thing to do, because the key thing is, yes, we've had criminal prosecutions, but what we haven't had is full accountability for anyone who allowed any of these sick crimes to happen in the first place. And that kind of accountability is what my constituents want, and I'm sure it's what your viewers want.
Paul, you were just one of a handful of Labour MPs who called for a national inquiry in January. What was your personal reaction when Sir Keir Starmer said that people doing so were jumping on that far-right bandwagon? Did that make you nervous?
Well, I understand what he was trying to say. He was trying to say that some ex-fringes try to exploit this issue, not because they've got the interests of the victims at heart, but because they've got their own personal agendas at heart. I understand why he said that. Me personally, I think this goes way beyond party politics. This is something that should unite every single Briton. We do not want these sick crimes to happen. We want to make sure that there's justice for the victims, no matter how long ago this happened. Don't forget, Boris Johnson was the one who said that any inquiry into past crimes, historic sex abuse, was spaffing up the wall money. And I think that was completely wrong. He was the one who said that, it was a waste of cash. We now know it was not a waste of cash. In Rochdale, it certainly wasn't. We've got some serious prosecutions and serious convictions with long sentences. I hope we get some more. But crucially for me, the key thing is making sure that we get action. Don't forget, this government is the first government to act in full on the recommendations of the previous national inquiry by Alexis Jay, and now it says it's going to act in full on what Louise Casey's recommending.
I think, Paul, sorry to interrupt there, Paul. Sorry, Paul. I think your government has actually dropped some of those recommendations since committing to them in January. In particular, on compensation, one of the ICSA recommendations was that they should expand the time limit, and that was rejected while Parliament was in recess. But regardless, let's move on. As I said, you were a handful of Labour MPs who are calling for this. How can people trust Labour that they will get behind this judge-led inquiry, because so many of your MPs did not speak out when there was such a major national conversation about this issue in January?
Well, I think the process has been followed. You get someone like Louise Casey, who's got an unimpeachable reputation on this issue. She was the person who exposed what happened in Rotherham. She was the right person to pick for this. And what you need is to make sure you're basing it on the facts. She's done her preliminary fact finding, and I don't know what's in that, but I'm really heartened that the government has decided to go with it. The key thing is making sure you're doing this as evidence-based policy. And you can risk, if you don't do that, you can risk just listening to what anyone tells you. You have to make sure that this is rigorous. The reason you have to make sure it's rigorous is for the victims. They want it to be lasting, enduring, sustainable. They don't want anything to fall apart, just as some cases have fallen apart in court. And also, don't forget, they've been waiting for justice for many, many years, not just through the delays in the court system, which have meant even now, victims, I can tell you, my constituency are waiting many years to come to court. That's appalling. But what they've waited for is accountability as well, of anyone who's not directly involved in those crimes but knew about it. In the court case in Rochdale, we found out actually during that conviction, which emerged on Friday, that the prosecution said that some of the social workers had actually known about some of this abuse and others had failed to act. Now, that's the kind of thing we need to make sure we get full transparency on. As I say, that's exactly what my constituents want, and I hope that's what we get.
OK, Paul Ward, thank you very much. Labour MP for Rochdale, referring there to the testimony of Girl A during that trial in Minshall Street in Manchester. Girl A said that when she was just 10, she was referred to as a prostitute by social services. I do wonder if social workers in Rochdale tonight from that period will be a little bit nervous about this announcement from Sir Keir Starmer. They could soon be being questioned by a judge. Well, let's speak to another brave survivor, shall we? They've been central to our coverage this evening and indeed for many years. It's Fiona Goddard from Bradford. Fiona, thank you so much for joining us this evening. You've endured really appalling crimes in West Yorkshire, but you have achieved some convictions as well through your extraordinary bravery. Please tell us your reaction to Sir Keir Starmer's announcement tonight. Do you trust him when he calls for this and has ordered this judge-led inquiry?
I think that the government needs to work with the victims going forward upon the framework of how he's going to do it. I don't think this has come off of the back of the government actually wanting this. This has come off of the back of the hard work of many victims and whistleblowers for years that have been working and fighting so hard. And I think they're the ones that deserve all the credit.
Yeah, completely agree, Fiona, and you've been central to that, particularly campaigning for a local inquiry in Bradford. You've been speaking to Robbie Moore, the MP for Keighley in the Bradford district. Now, the government has said tonight that they're going to announce, they're going to keep, the local inquiries alongside this national inquiry. Do you hope that Bradford will be one of those towns that gets a local inquiry? Because, of course, the local authorities there have been resisting it for years.
I think Bradford needs an inquiry. I think it's central to any information that will come forward going forward. Every victim I've ever met has been trafficked to Bradford or have men come from Bradford. I think without a local inquiry into Bradford, that it would struggle to expose the full scale of things. I do think it's very important that Bradford still gets an inquiry.
Yeah, and there will be thousands of victims in Bradford, many of whom may think that what happened to them was normal, just because of how widespread it was. They may not even see it as abuse because of this. The grooming model of exploitation means that many victims think that their abusers are their boyfriends. It's such an appalling and malicious form of exploitation. But do you have confidence now that some of those survivors, they'll hear this announcement and they'll finally think, here's a government that wants to work with us, that's going to listen to us? Or do you think it's far too late now for this sort of announcement and they'll be very nervous about coming forward?
I think we're still going to have a lot of people that are very nervous of coming forward, or some that just, like you said, do not understand. Some of the victims are still trapped in cycles of trauma and abuse, and I think the inquiries and the publication of what happened will help them maybe realise eventually. But I do think it is still going to be a difficult process to get everyone to come forward after so long and so many failings and such bad terminology for so long.
Now, Fiona, as I said, you've had some convictions for your perpetrators, many of whom are still behind bars. But do you also want to see some justice for the local authorities, the social workers, the police officers, and the wider sort of local powers that failed you and did not provide you the justice and the protection that you needed when you were a child?
Yes, so the public services that failed, the people that made failings should be fired. The people that actively covered it over, they should face prosecution. If it had been a parent that had have done some of this stuff or allowed some of this stuff to happen, they would have been prosecuted. So professionals that allowed it should also be prosecuted.
And Fiona, we were just hearing from Paul Waugh, the Labour MP for Rochdale, before you came up on air, and he told us that he thinks that the correct process has been followed in announcing this inquiry. But Baroness Casey went away to conduct the review and that this is the right way to have done it. Do you agree?
No, I think this should have been done a long, long time ago. I actually think this should have never have happened in the first place, but we are in a position that we are, and now it's just about making sure it is done properly. The victims do not need another whitewash, they do not need another cover-up. This needs to be done properly to a full scale, with accountability, with everything open to the public, and we need to also be looking at developing framework going forward in prevention of these crimes, and so we can see a reduction and less victims. And we need to be focusing more on getting everything out in the open than we do on whitewashing it again. So we need to now be putting pressure on the government to work with the victims going forward to develop the best framework that is going to actually get us justice and be able to put us in a position that we can finally rebuild our lives and move on.
Fiona Goddard, it's an honour as ever to have your testimony live on GB News. Thank you so much for joining us this evening with your powerful experiences and perspective. Thank you.